provide water quality improvements. Underground facilities include filter cartridges, engineered filter cartridges, where basically the flow through goes through a media that then filters the stormwater before releasing it downstream. Those are, what comes with those are larger operation and maintenance costs as far as those filters need to be replaced. So it's a trade-off. We certainly look to do these surface feature treatments wherever possible because they're the most low cost solution, but we could certainly evaluate some underground treatment options where these surface treatments may be prohibited due to parking or property access. Giselle, do you have anything that you could considered or add to that?
Those filter cartridges are probably our next best option. Yeah, I think that would be our alternative.
Right. We could also potentially explore a porous pavement. I don't know if the infiltration the soils, we'd have to talk to our geotech about that. But we could also consider that, like possibly doing in the parking spaces a porous pavement.
Yeah, I think we should look for an option for the residential zone and the residential impact of the parking. I think in specific areas, we probably want to look at options, at least see what they have as options and what that cost impact would be.
One thing I would recommend.
Okay, so we're looking at the Washington Avenue one, probably is primarily concerned with the parking.
But I'm also looking at Utah Avenue on East Utah, the one on the uphill side of A15A, which is in front of another resident. And I can see the ones on 903 probably not so bad because that side doesn't have sidewalks a whole lot, but I think anything that goes in front of a residence, we should probably take a look at a consideration of parking for the resident.
That one on Idaho I was looking at as well, it's right, it's covering the front of that proposed lot. Yeah, nothing's there, but it would, there's no other way to get into that lot.
So one thing,
And the Utah Avenue one, that would be, that one does have sidewalks, so it would be between the sidewalk and the roadway.
Okay.
Keo's got something to add, Carrie, just a second.
so if you look at the standards, our standard
sure.
street sections, you'll see depending on whether we got a 50-foot or 60-foot right of way, there's driving lanes, parking lanes, and then landscape strips. We can imagine, for the most part, we just depress those landscape strips. For access to a house, we still have the driveway, and we just can't have a culvert to connect two sides of it if we need. So for the most part, it's kind of almost what we did on North C Street up there, but we hogged in that nice swale. That was a little bit big, of course, for some of the flood issues, but picture something just kind of a little smaller than that. And then where the bioswale comes in is most of the time it's amended soil they put in there. That's where the treatment portion comes in. So if you look at our standard street sections, for the most part, they can kind of fit right in. It's just the bioswale instead of the landscape strip.
One of the issues is we don't have a lot of properties with driveways in some of these areas, so, you know, it kind of makes it very difficult for people, and we have, we're getting more people, so I think we have to look ahead and see that we're not cutting off people who might be developing some of the lots that are empty around town. So, I would appreciate if there's ability to look at other options.
Yeah, and Theo, that's a great clarification about the right-of-way width, which is not really reflected in these concept level drawings that we'll get better information on as we get the topographic survey and the right-of-way line. We'll be able to see, are we still able to achieve putting these swales in and providing that parking?
We guarantee we're not
And
going
the
to have
property
access
access.
to any lots or whatnot. And you've probably seen like what we did on North C Street up there. There's specific standards about how wide the driveways can be even. So we don't necessarily need to worry about having an entire lot accessible there. As much as anything, we can put a culvert in like we did up on North C Street there.
I think this is gonna be a case where taking it from the 30,000 foot level, which is a 30% design, down to the lower level, it's gonna have to be, you walk the exact site, estimate where everything is, you know, and just kind of, you know this very well, right? It's one thing to draw a plan, it's another to execute it when you have all sorts of existing structures around. And you have to give it a lot more tender loving care.
It's the one timeline that got pushed back a little bit, which is unfortunate. We we're planning to do all the survey and geotech work before winter here. So just that, nail down that very site specific, so we can kind of take it to that 30% level, and you start to essentially incorporate it into the same sections we have already in our street sections there. And you say, here's how we kind of fit that into the window of what our standards already have.
Right, and that may mean relocating them. I mean, it may mean that that particular location in areas that's been used historically for parking.
Indeed, I could see like Washington's not up there anymore, but potentially you can imagine where the driveways are going to go in. We just might have that segmented a little more. And then they say, okay, well, we lost so much surface area, so we need to find a new place to augment for that surface area.
Especially with the sidewalks on Washington, you just have that little surface area you can deal with.
You know, part of it is when you kind of knuckle down on that actual right of way width from the survey there.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, a lot of the streets in Roslyn, when you look at where the right of way is on the 60-foot, like the asphalt lane, like on North C Street, is way on one side and whatnot. You know, there's a lot of areas of town that got a lot more space than what it looks like.
But that's my concern, actually, when you start looking at it, like the Utah one I'm just looking at, and I know what my right, I know Center Road as we think, right? But then when I have my house surveyed, I know that the alley is in the wrong spot
Yeah.
to my house.
Right.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And then I look at the parking on the side, and to me, I don't have one located at the house I'm talking about. But if there were one there, I couldn't park. I couldn't park in the front of my house, because that right of way to where the street is just isn't identified. You know, our streets are very narrow. We know that surveying in the past is sort of, especially on that Brookside,
Indeed.
is all over the place, right, in lot lines.
Yes.
And you found that out, right? You know
Well,
that.
and it's something that, this is kind of a chance, like, for 203, we know some of the drainage issues. We're talking about half street and full street improvements here potentially.
Yep.
So on some of that stuff, it's a chance to kind of
Okay.
fix it all. so
Well, I
to
think
speak.
those are what we need to see a little bit down
Indeed.
design down the road.
Oh,
then.
absolutely.
And then, obviously, there needs to be some type of communication with neighbors or whoever those residents that will
Oh,
be
definitely.
impacted
Oh, yeah.
on what those impact do and how we work with them to make it work. Because, it is gonna be specific homes, or, like, say, the one in front of the boarding house and so forth. I mean, that just raised a big flag when I saw it.
Oh, understood.
I just,
Well, and like I say, if we double check, I could follow up and actually send the street section from the standards too. Again, you'll see
Yeah.
how the lane, parking, landscape strip.
Yep.
So we can have the swales in there and still have parking and still have the drive lane.
Yeah, it's hard to visualize that, right, when I'm
Understood.
looking at narrow
Yeah,
streets
understood.
and layout. So that's my only concern.
Understood. Yeah. And it can be difficult on this kind of 30,000
Yep.
level, like, or
Yep.
the 30% level there.
Well, I think this discussion's great, and I think, you have to have a high-level plan to even generate the discussion. But I think going to the next level, a lot of this feedback should go in before there's a lot of design done, because if there's changes, you don't wanna retread, do a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's something, Carrie, even on where some of those swales are located, just to essentially if we pull together some half-street sections, just to make sure everything's gonna fit there.
Well, the overarching thing, and maybe this is my perspective and not others, is what's the impact on the whole town as far as the historic look of the entire town? Because swales are not something that actually have been around for in the last 100 years. And not that I'm opposed to doing something that works, but I think there has to be some balance. I see swales along the highway, I'm trying to visualize that, I'm having a hard time, so I don't wanna pretend I'm not. So that's again why I think looking at a undergrounded option would actually help maintain our historic integrity.
Yeah, the only, last question I had was, I saw estimates for the various, in the, comp plan. Are there estimates, for maintenance? Like, given where the city's at, it'd be good to have a heads up on what, if anybody thought that there were some ideas on what the yearly maintenance might be, that we could, factor in for the future.
It's always a place.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a swale is going to be traditionally more cost-effective maintenance-wise than an underground filter cartridge system, but we could certainly evaluate that moving forward as well. And there are some I was trying to think of the name of the street, Theo. There is that swale that does exist not far from the city hall. That is kind of hidden. You don't necessarily notice it, but I think that the street section that you guys have there, it lends itself to this swale solution. You don't have curb and gutter and You've got the Crown Street that goes to, gravel areas adjacent to it, and I understand a lot of that's used for parking, but it lends itself really well towards this type of treatment system. I think it could blend really nice with the, landscaping around the area where it wouldn't stick out separately from, being out of character for the area.
I think, on Brookside, most parts of Brookside don't have a drainage system, or if they do, it's an ad hoc drainage system. And folks have kind of gotten used to that. And so this then starts creating a drainage system, which in a lot of ways is gonna be like a swale system, a ditch or system. But, that's gonna be a change, right? Because people are not gonna be able to use the right of way that they thought they were gonna use, because there's a drainage system there. And so it's just something that has to be thought about and factored in so that it has the least impact.
I appreciate this project at 30%, this opportunity to talk about different things. I mean, we might not agree on everything, but at least I think it's important to talk about things we disagree on.
Right, and our first step, once we get the topographic survey, will be to, lay out these concept level swales and see how they fit within the right of way and fit within the context of, potential parking and sidewalks and property access and such. And then we certainly could come back with another presentation of how that looks before we get too far into design.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this document here provides a roadmap for the citywide improvements that you could look to implement in future projects, whereas the 30% design report we were looking at is just focusing in on that CIP1 drainage basin. And then we also have the draft grant application for the final design and construction of that CIP1 treatment area, and then the proposal of the Mead and Hunt's additional services and the schedule of an overall schedule too. So we're looking at advancing the final design of that CIP1 area this summer, and then going to final design of the project later this year, with construction slated for next year. Is there anything else the council would like me to show, or questions you have?
No, I think we're good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Seemed like perfect timing to
Okay.
have them come in and give us a presentation.
I agree. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're too looking, if you're would like to formally adopt that comp plan addendum at some point, make that part of the city's stormwater comprehensive plan as a whole. That would be our recommendation, and then looking for approval, on the draft grant agreement, so we can move forward with the next steps with ecology on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Okay, so next up is citizen comments. And I won't say non-agenda items, but we have 3 public hearings, so if you want to comment on one of the public hearings, you don't need to comment during citizen comments. To remind you, the 3 public hearings are the B&O utility tax increase, the wildfire prevention ordinance, and then a second public hearing for the development moratorium. So with that said, is there any citizen comments outside of those 3? Okay, then I will open up the first public hearing, which is on the B&O utility tax increase. I open that public hearing. Anybody like to speak on this? Council will be discussing when we're done here. Okay, so if there's nobody to talk on that, I will close the public hearing for the B&O utility tax increase. And then we will open up the public hearing for the wildfire prevention ordinance. Anyone want to speak on this one? Okay, I will close the wildfire prevention ordinance, and then the last one is the second public hearing on the development moratorium. I'll open that public hearing. Any comments on that one? Okay. I close the public hearing for the second development moratorium, and there was nobody in the first one either, so. Okay, so new business, will be the utility rate increase. It's discussion only, council. I believe, did admin talk about this? Do you guys wanna speak to this?
We did talk about, the utility rate increase, and just thought we need to get it out in front of council again, because it's old stuff. This rate was done in 19, is that right?
Yeah.
2019.
2019 is when this study was done, and our current utility rate increase rate study expires after this year, so we don't have a utility rate increase. I don't know what council's thoughts are on continuing to do rate increases, but we have to do 2% water and sewer every year, so we're in compliance with USDA loans and still able to get that type of match granting for doing improvements. We just heard this great stormwater presentation. Currently, our stormwater rates are pretty low, and that fund is very shallow. Probably more shallow than the swales that you saw.
And we wipe it out.
We're in dire need to fill our
Every year.
stormwater.
I guess
It's in bad
thoughts from admin were that we probably need to maintain our 2% increase on those water and sewer in compliance with USDA loans, and we need to double down on storm.
So 4% for some,
Or we were
6.
even maybe doing like an $8, was it $8 or $10 on
It's
Yeah, 10, I think we
Should we-
talked $10.
Oh, on the storm, so
On
it
the
goes from
storm, right.
568 or something like that to 10 something would be the jump to get us on board with what that rate study indicates for 2023.
With numerous storm projects in the next 10 years down the path, I mean, we have lots of stuff to work on.
It'd be nice.
Major projects.
This doesn't need to be acted on tonight, this is just a discussion only. That's kind of what admin was thinking on the storm, that's,
Yeah, and the
it's
thought-
not we don't need an increase in sewer so much, we need to maintain that 2% sewer compliance, but I don't think we need to increase it, cause those projects we don't have any projects, that's pretty good. Water, there's still projects that need to be done, that's what
I don't know.
we need to look at that, so that's kind of where we are at with the admin discussion.
And then the thought here would be that the increase in storm to the $10 level would be 2023, beginning of the year. Now, there was also discussion that we take some of the reserves out of the sewer
Yeah.
that are current and just move that reserve to the storm reserves.
Yeah, I don't know if it was reserves as much as the allocated funding. I mean, I hadn't heard reserves, I guess, in that format. I think our original thought was if we paid 55 in the storm, could we lessen that to like a $40 into sewer? Would be, if it was 55 lower to a lower range, because we have a decent pot in there, then take that money, so we're not directly taking that funding out of residents, we're taking allocated money that went to sewer, taking $15 of that and allocating that towards storm to build that fund, because it's just been a neglected fund, obviously, through administration after administration. This isn't one particular, this has been 20 years or 25 years of negligence that needs to be built out with around storm projects. And so that was just another idea of how to do it without trying to do a direct impact right away to residents.
Yeah, that's.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
That what we're?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, was
Yeah.
some.
Yeah, I didn't know if we
taking
could
that-
take reserves
Yeah.
from pot to pot. That was the only reason I.
Yeah,
went
not
that way.
reserve, we weren't talking about reserves,
No.
but just the.
Purely funding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Appropriated funding to those, if that's something we can do.
Well, we can work up some kind of whiteboard
Yep.
for next counselor soon.
Yeah, we could put it
And
up
just
for
say,
the
this is
residents
where
to
they
sort of
are,
see.
these are what we probably could do.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple thing to put black and white for people to get their head around why we wanna do it and how we wanna do it.
Okay.
I think that'd be a good idea.
I think that'd be a great idea.
It's, it's clear, we started looking at all the projects we have and the costs, and I I mean, just in the big picture, it's clear that we're, you know, we're short.
Yeah.
And so, but how it marries up to our expected grants and how much we need and how much we have to cover, you know, we'll never get that perfect, but at least to have a kind of a better roadmap maybe.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anything else on the utility rate increase, council? Okay, next up, we have, the mastication service agreement. I think this is for the forest project.
This is for the DNR
DNR
grant.
money.
Yep, with our match, so.
So we need a motion on this?
Make a motion that we, accept the,
I'll second that motion.
Wildfire prevent, mastication service agreement.
Right.
Any discussion on this?
So is this just like residential, or are they referring to the Roslyn Forest as well?
This is for the rosin.
It's only the
So this is
forest.
part of
Just
that.
for the Roslyn?
Yeah,
I'm
the
so-
waste product that's up there, the fuels that are
I'm
still
just-
sitting on the ground.
I was shocked that like prohibited trees.
oh, that's something different.
That's the wildfire preventive.
Oh,
that's
I'm
different.
sorry,
This
Joe.
is
That's
the
different.
agreement, the
The agreement.
AFM agreement.
The
Oh,
DNR is
sorry,
gonna
I-
fund us to go up and cut up the stuff in the
Just go
fine
ahead.
I don't wanna, sorry about that.
to make the forest more healthy. And less susceptible to wildfire.
Okay, I jumped that.
And will the mastication, will that clean up some of the mess that's down at the, over here behind the Plum Creek office? The
Yes.
Crystal Creek landing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other discussion here, council? All in favor of accepting the mastication service agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Next up is the REIT tax increase, real estate excise tax. Admin, you guys wanna comment on this one?
I make the motion to approve the REIT tax increase.
I'll second that motion.
Go ahead.
And this is another low-hanging fruit that we can do a tax increase. We haven't done this forever. So this is, excise tax on real estate, so, and it can only be used for capital projects. It's not, I don't know, what was the predict?
27,000.
$27,000 or $28,000.
That's all it's gonna bring.
4 years, that's $100,000.
But when you're where we're at, when you're where a city's at, where we're at, every penny counts, so.
I just have one question is,